Okay, so magandang wait lang. Ayan, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. At muli, nandito na naman ang inyong Lolo Ray, no, para magbasa-basa na naman ng mga batas na may kinalaman sa taxation naman, no. Itutuloy natin yung ating binabasa na ah, National Internal Revenue Code, no. Kasama pa rin ang taxation. Okay? Ay, sorry. National Internal Revenue Code, kasama pa rin ang train law. Kasi may mga pagbabagong dinulot yung train law, no? So, binabasa natin siya kasama yung mga pagbabago. At hindi na natin binabanggit yung mga natanggal na, no? So, nandito na tayo sa Chapter 2, yung tinatawag na Donor's Tax. Isimulan natin yan sa Section 98. Wait lang. Saan ba yung mga yun? Okay, Section 98. Sabi rito, imposition of tax. Imposition of tax. Letter A, there shall be levied, assessed, sabi niya, collected, and paid upon the transfer by any person, resident, or non-resident of the property by gift, a tax computed as provided in Section 99. Yun yung sinasabi niya. So, Section 99, mamaya pupuntahan natin yung rates, no? So, meron daw kukolektahin sa pagta-transfer ng isang tao, resident man ito o non-resident man ito ng Pilipinas, ng property. And letter B, the tax shall apply whether the transfer is in trust or otherwise, whether the gift is direct or indirect, or whether the property is real or personal, tangible or intangible. Magtungo tayo sa Section 99, no? Kasi may pagbabagong ginawa dito ang train law. Dali medyo mahirap. Ayan. Ay, sumobra naman. Section 99. Okay. Punta tayo rito. Section 99, rates of tax payable by donor. So, letter A, in general, the tax for each calendar year shall be 6% computed on the basis of the total gifts in excess of 250,000 pesos, exempt gift made during the year. Okay. So, kung lalagpas ng 250,000, no? Kung lalagpas ng 250,000, yung iyong niregalo, sabi niya. Yung excess sa 250,000 multiplied by 6%, yun ang iyong payable donor's tax. So, kunwari, ang halaga ng regalo mo ay 260,000. So, meron kang 10,000 na lagpas. Diba? Meron kang 10,000 na lampas. That is, yung 6% ng 10,000? 600 pesos. Okay, so yun ang babayaran mong donor's tax. Kasi, kung ang i-donate mo naman 200,000, wala kang babayaran donor's tax daw. Kasi, ang sabi rito sa bagong nilagay ng train law, 250,000 pesos yung exempt, di ba? Okay. So, letter B, Section 99. Letter B, teka. Okay, any contribution in cash or in kind to any candidate, political party, or coalition of parties for campaign purposes shall be governed by the election code as amended. So, nasa omnibus election code ito. Na meron na, ang pagkakaalam ko rito is taxable yung mga hindi nagastos na contributions, at ang magbabayad nun ay yung candidate, no? O, magtungo na tayo sa section 100, no? Section 100. Okay. May pagbabago rin na ginawa dito ang train law. Wait lang Sige, sandali. Markahan lang natin ng konti. 99 and then 100. Sige. Sabi rito, transfer for less than adequate and full consideration. Where property other than real property referred to in Section 24D is transferred for less than an adequate and full consideration in money or money's worth, then the amount by which the fair market value of the property exceeded the value of the consideration shall, for the purpose of the tax imposed by this chapter, be deemed a gift. Okay? And shall be included in computing the amount of gifts made during the calendar year. Provided, however, that a sale, exchange, or other transfer of property made in the ordinary course of business, ang example nito yung transaction which is bona fide at arm's length and free from any donative intent, will be considered as made for an adequate and full consideration in money or money's worth. Yan yung nilagay ng yung provided na yan. Yan yung nilagay ng train law. Sulitin nga natin, kapag ang isang ari-arian daw bukod sa isang real property, itinransfer for less than adequate and full consideration, no? Then the amount by which the fair market value of the property exceeded the value of the considerations, ibig sabihin, itinransfer sa yung ari-arian sa napakababang halaga. So, yung excess daw nun, for the purpose of tax, shall be deemed a gift. Yan ang sinasabi niya, no? Provided, however, ito naman yung nilagay ng train law, that a sale, exchange, or other transfer of property made in the ordinary course of business, sabi, will be considered as made for an adequate and full consideration in money or money's worth. Okay. Section 101, sabi rito, the following gifts or donations shall be exempt from the tax provided for in this chapter. So, basahin na natin kung paano binago ng train law, no? Number 1, gifts made to or for the use of the national government or any entity created by any of its agencies, which is not conducted for profit or to any political subdivision of the said government. Yan, exempt yan. Number 2, gifts in favor of an educational end or charitable, religious, cultural, or social welfare corporation, institution, accredited non-government organization, trust or philanthropic organization or research institution or organization. Sabi niya, exempted daw yan sa buwis, sa donor's tax. Provided, however, that not more than 30% of said gifts shall be used by such donee for administration purposes. For the purpose of this exemption, sabi niya, a non-profit educational and or charitable corporation, institution, accredited non-government organization, trust, or philanthropic organization and or research institute, or organizations in a school, college, or university, or charitable corporation, accredited non-government organization, trust. Okay, sabi niya, organization incorporated, yung mga ganun nabanggit natin na incorporated as a non-stock entity, paying no dividends, governed by trustees who receive no compensation and devoting all its income, whether students' fees or gifts, donations, subsidies, or other forms of philanthropy, to the accomplishment and promotion of the purposes enumerated in its incorporation. So, dapat daw hindi hihigit sa 30% ng mga nabanggit na regalong yun, yung gagamitin nung pinagbigyan nung donee for administration purposes. Yun lang naman ang sinasabi niya rito. Okay, letter B. Dali Section 101 pa rin tayo, letter B. In the case of gifts made by a non-resident, not a citizen of the Philippines, sabi niya, number 1, gifts made to or for the use of the national government or any entity created by any of its agencies, which is not conducted for profit or to any political subdivision of the said government. So, kahit na non-resident ka pa, non-taxable daw yun. yung gifts na binigay mo. Okay, ang example siguro nito yung mga nagdo-donate kay Mayor Isko Moreno, non-taxable yun, lalo na kung binibigay siya for the hindi siya conducted for profit at binibigay siya para sa donasyon, para sa ikabubuti ng Maynila, no? Kasi nakikita nga naman nila si Mayor Isko Moreno, lahat ng donasyon accounted for, pinopost sa social media kung saan mapupunta yung donasyon mo, di ba? Number 2, gifts. So exempted sila, yung mga nagdo-donate kay Mayor Isko, dahil ang pamahalaan ang city government ng Manila ay political subdivision ng gobyerno niya, di ba? So exempted sila kahit non-resident pa yung nagbigay ng gift, no? Ikalawa, gifts in favor of an educational and or charitable, religious, cultural or social welfare corporation, institution, foundation, trust or philanthropic organization, or research institution or organization, provided however that not more than 30% of said gifts shall be used by such donee for administration purposes. So hindi lalagpas sa 30% yung gagamitin ng donee for administration purposes. Okay, letter C. Tax credit for donors taxes paid to a foreign country. Uy, tignan nga natin. Sabi in general, the tax imposed by this title upon a donor who was a citizen or resident at the time of donation shall be credited with the amount of any donor's tax of any character and description imposed by the authority of a foreign country. Kasi di ba kinikilala naman natin yung tax credits na, di ba? Yung tax credits, yung ibinayad niya na nabuwis doon, basta kinikilala ng bansang ito, i-credit natin yun. Number 2, limitations on credit. The amount of the credit taken under this section shall be subject to each of the following limitations. Letter A, the amount of the credit in respect to the tax paid to any country shall not exceed the same proportion of the tax against which such credit is taken, which the net gifts situated within such country taxable under this title bears to his entire net gifts. And letter B, the total amount of the credit shall not exceed the same proportion of the tax against which such credit is taken, which the donor's net gifts situated outside the Philippines taxable under this title bears to his entire net gifts. Okay? Okay. Yon. So, i-kesa na natin yan. Ano yan? Binasa natin siya ng kasama na, no? National Internal Revenue Code, tsaka yung pagbabagong ginawa ng train law. So, nagtapos tayo sa section 101. Magpunta muna tayo dun sa mga provisions na walang pagbabago yung train law. Sige, balik tayo dito. So, 101, 102 na tayo. Valuation of gifts made in property. If the gift is made in property, the fair market value thereof at the time of the gift shall be considered the amount of the gift. In case of real property, the provision of Section 88B shall apply to the valuation thereof. Okay, so kung ang regalo daw ay property, yung fair market value daw noon at the time nung binigay mo yung gift shall be considered the amount of the gift. Okay. So, Section 88B raw yung mag-a-apply para malaman natin yung valuation noon. Okay, Section 103. Wala pa rin pagbabagong dinulot ng train dito. Okay, filing of return and payment of tax. Letter A, requirements. Any individual who makes any transfer by gift, except those which under Section 101 are exempt from the tax provided for in this chapter, shall, so, for the purpose of the said tax, make a return under oath in duplicate. So, ito yung mga nakalagay sa return niya. Okay. Number 1, each gift made during the calendar year, which is to be included in computing net gifts. Number 2, the deductions claimed and allowable. Number 3, any previous net gifts made during the same calendar year. Number 4, the name of the donee. And number 5, such further information as may be required by rules and regulations made pursuant to law. Letter B, time and place of filing and payment. Teka lang. Okay. Yan. So, yung nabanggit natin sa una, yun yung mga dapat nakalagay sa sa return mo para ma-exempt ka dun sa tax dahil nga sa pagbibigay ng gift. O letter B, time and place of filing and payment. The return of the donor required in this section shall be filed within 30 days after the date the gift is made, and the tax due thereon shall be paid at the time of the filing. Okay. So, 30 days after the date, within 30 days. So, kung binigyan kita ng gift ngayon, bibilang ka ng 30 days. Ngayon, 1, bukas, tapos tunod-tunod, within 30 days doon, kung kailan kita binigyan ng regalo. Tapos, pag nag-file ako doon, babayaran ko na rin yung tax due ko. Except in cases where the commissioner otherwise permits, the return shall be filed and the tax paid to an authorized agent bank, the revenue district officer, revenue collection officer, or duly authorized treasurer of the city or municipality where the donor was domiciled at the time of the transfer, or if there be no legal residence in the Philippines, with the office of the commissioner. In the case of gifts made by a non-resident, okay, the return may be filed with the Philippine Embassy. Ayun, kasi wala siya sa bansa. So, yung return niya, pwede niya i-file sa Philippine Embassy or consulate in the country where he is domiciled at the time of the transfer, or directly with the office of the commissioner. Commissioner ng BIR yan, Okay, Section 104. Wala pa ring pagbabago rito na binigay ang train law. Definitions lang tayo for purposes of this title, basahin lang natin. The terms gross estate and gifts include real and personal property, whether tangible or intangible, or mixed, wherever situated. Dinidefine nga ito for the purpose of this title, which is yung donation, for the purpose of yung donation. Ulitin natin, gross estate and gifts include real and personal property, whether tangible or intangible, or mixed, wherever situated. Provided, however, that where the decedent or donor was a non-resident alien at the time of his death or donation, as the case may be, his real and personal property so transferred, but which are situated outside the Philippines, shall not be included as part of his gross estate or gross gift. Provided further that franchise which must be exercised in the Philippines, shares, obligations, or bonds issued by any corporation or sociedad anonima organized or constituted in the Philippines in accordance with its laws. Yan, yung mga shares, obligations, or bonds by any foreign corporation, 85% of the business of which is located in the Philippines. Yung mga shares, obligations, or bonds issued by any foreign corporation, if such shares, obligations, or bonds have acquired a business situs or situs in the Philippines, shares or rights in any partnership, business, or industry established in the Philippines, yung mga yan na shall be considered as situated in the Philippines, sabi. Provided still further that no tax shall be collected under this title, walang buwis daw na hihilingin under this title in respect of intangible personal property. Ano ba yung mga yun? Letter A, if the decedent at the time of his death or the donor at the time of the donation was a citizen and resident of a foreign country which at the time of his death or donation did not impose a transfer tax of any character in respect of intangible personal property of citizens of the Philippines not residing in that foreign country. Okay, pag ganun daw, walang no tax shall be collected. Or letter B, if the laws of the foreign country of which the decedent or donor was a citizen and resident at the time of his death or donation allows a similar exemption from transfer or death taxes of every character or description in respect of intangible personal property owned by citizens of the Philippines not residing in that foreign country. Hindi na natin bubuwisan kung hindi naman pinabubuwisan din sa kanila, hindi ba? The term deficiency means, letter A, the amount by which tax imposed by this chapter exceeds the amount as the tax by the donor upon his return. So, lumalagpas, no? Ibig sabihin, merong inimpose na tax itong chapter na ito. Pero lumagpas yun, exceeds the amount shown as the tax by the donor upon his return. So, sa madaling salita, kinulang yung nilagay nung donor sa return, no? Kulang. So, may deficiency siya. O kaya naman daw, if no amount is shown as a tax by the donor, then the amount by which the tax exceeds the amounts previously assessed or collected without assessment as a deficiency. But such amounts previously assessed or collected without assessment shall first be decreased by the amount previously abated, refunded, or otherwise repaid in respect of such tax. Okay, magpunta na tayo sa Title 4 ng National Internal Revenue Code. Pag-uusapan natin ang Value Added Tax. Okay. Chapter 1, Imposition of Tax. Pero bago yan, ako mahaba-haba ito at maraming pagbabaong ginawa ang train law dito. Ihihi muna tayo, ha? Okay, tayo muling nagbabalik, no? At ituloy-tuloy na natin yung ating mga binabasa. Okay. Ngayon, Title 4 na tayo. Title 4, Value Added Tax, Chapter 1, Imposition of Tax. Magsisimula ito sa Section 105. Persons liable. Any person who, in the course of trade or business, sells, barters, exchanges, leases goods or properties, renders services and any person who imports goods. Ayan, basta mag-i-import ka shall be subject to the value added tax imposed in sections 106 to 108 of this code. Okay, so ang pagkakaalam ko nito, kahit na mag-i-import ka for personal use lang, hindi mo naman ininegosyo, basta nag-import ka, you are subject to VAT. Okay? The value-added tax is an indirect tax, and the amount of tax may be shifted or passed on to the buyer, transferee, or lessee of the goods, properties, or services. Okay. This rule shall likewise apply to existing contracts of sale or lease of goods, properties, or services at the time of the effectivity of RA 7716. Okay? The phrase "in the course of trade or business" means regular conduct or pursuit of a commercial or an economic activity, including transactions incidental thereto, by any person, regardless of whether or not the person engaged therein is a non-stock, non-profit private organization, irrespective thou of the disposition of its net income and whether or not it sells exclusively to members or their guests or government entity. Ang tinitingnan daw dito yung the rule of regularity. To the contrary, notwithstanding, services as defined in this code rendered in the Philippines by non-resident foreign persons shall be considered as being course of trade or business. So, ulitin natin ha. Sino daw yung mga magbabayad ng VAT? Lahat ng tao, any person who in the course of trade or business, nagbebenta siya, nakikipag-exchange, nangungupahan, naglilis siya ng goods or properties, nagre-render ng services, sabi. And any person who imports goods, sabi, shall be subject to the value added tax. Section 106, dito na yata yung merong pagbabago, tama ba? O, puntahan natin ito sa... sunod-sunod. O, sige. Hanggang 1010 pala. So, okay, wait lang. I-organize lang natin. Babasahin natin, ha. Para pagbalik natin, okay siya. Okay, babalik tayo dito sa 111, no? Okay. Okay, 106. Punta tayo. May pinagbago kasi ang train law dito, eh. Section 106, value added tax on sale of goods or properties. Letter A, rate and base of tax. There shall be levied, assessed, and collected on every sale, barter, or exchange of goods or properties value added tax or VAT equivalent to 12% of the gross selling price or gross value in money of the goods or property sold, bartered, or exchanged, such tax to be paid by the seller or transferor. So, ang magbabayad nito, sabi niya, to be paid by the seller or transferor. So, kung ako yung nagnenegosyo, ako yung Jollibee, babayaran ko ito. 12% of my gross selling price, no? Yun nga lamang, may ipapasa ko ito sa customer. Pero tingnan natin, yaman na natin yun. Okay. So, ito yung mga under doon sa rate and base of tax. Yung kakabasa lang natin. Sabi niya, goods or properties shall mean all tangible and intangible objects which are capable of pecuniary estimation. Ibig sabihin, pwedeng sukatin sa halaga ng pera. And shall include letter A, real properties held primarily for sale to customers or held for lease in the ordinary course or trade or business. Malinaw po yun, ha. In the ordinary course of trade or business, hindi kasali dito yung vacant lot mo na hindi mo naman ginagamit sa negosyo o hindi mo naman ipinaparenta. Letter B, the right or the privilege to use patent, copyright, design, or model, plan, secret formula, or process, goodwill, trademark, trade brand, or other like property or right. Letter C, the right or the privilege to use in the Philippines or any industrial, commercial, or scientific equipment. Letter D, the right or the privilege to use motion picture films, tapes, and discs. And letter E, radio, television, satellite transmission, and cable television time. The term gross selling price means the total amount of money or its equivalent which the purchaser pays or is obligated to pay to the seller in consideration of the sale, barter, or exchange of the goods or properties, excluding o hindi kasama yung value added tax. The excise tax, if any, on such goods or properties shall form part of the gross selling price. Bahagi yon ng gross selling price daw kung meron mang excise tax. Kunwari, sigarilyo or alak yung binibenta mo, ganun. Oh, so yun pala ang ibig sabihin ng gross selling price. So kung kunwari, ang binibenta ko lang sa buong taon ay isang Chicken Joy, kunwari. Ang gross selling price niya kunwari is 100 pesos na hindi kasama yung VAT. Pero pag binili siya ng customer, 112, di ba? So 100 pesos lang siya. Yun ang gross selling price. O ngayon, kung isasama pa natin, kunwari may excise tax. Kunwari lamang yung Chicken Joy may excise tax, which is wala naman, kunwari lang. So kunwari ang halaga ng excise tax ay 5%. So 105. So yun lang ang ibig niya sabihin dito. Kung may excise tax man, yung produktong ginagamit mo, i-include mo yon as part ng gross selling price. Pero hindi mo isasali yung halagang ipinapatong mo kapag ipinagbili mo na o ipinasa mo na sa customer mo. Number 2, the following sales by VAT registered persons shall be subject to 0% rate. Ito yung mga 0% rate, sabi. Letter A. Letter A. Export sales, di ba? The term export sales means, number 1, the sale and actual shipment of goods from the Philippines to a foreign country, irrespective of any shipping arrangement that may be agreed upon, which may influence or determine the transfer of ownership of the goods so exported and paid for in acceptable foreign currency or its equivalent in goods or services, and accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Okay. Yun siya. So, 0 rated na pagka exporter ka. Wow, ha? Okay. Okay, wait lang. Okay, ito. Number 2, sale of raw materials or packaging materials to a non-resident buyer for delivery to a resident local export-oriented enterprise to be used in manufacturing, processing, packing, or repacking in the Philippines of said buyer's goods and paid for in acceptable foreign currency and accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the BSP. So ito mga 0 rated to. 0 rated ang VAT. Kung mapapansin nyo, may sinabi pa rin siyang processing and repacking, no? Sabi niya, packaging materials, sale of raw materials or packaging materials. For export pa rin to a resident local export-oriented enterprise. So, ini-encourage, kaya hindi binubuwisan yung exporter, ini-encourage na mag-export tayo para lumakas yung ekonomiya natin. Number 3, sale of raw materials or packaging materials to export-oriented enterprise whose export sales exceed 70% of total annual production. Yun. Number 4, Vinito daw Sale of gold sa BSP, Vinito, yung deleted na yun. So, susunod na nating babasahin is yung those considered export sales under EO 226, otherwise known as the Omnibus Investment Code of 1987 and other special laws. So, basta export, no? At susunod, yung number 6 pa rin siya rito, pero number 5 na siya kasi dinilit yung number 4. So, the sale of goods, supplies, equipment, and fuel to persons engaged in international shipping daw or international air transport operations. So, ito pa yung dinagdag ng train law, provided that the goods, supplies, equipment, and fuel shall be used for international shipping or air transport operations. Provided ulit that subparagraphs 3, 4, 5 hereof shall be subject to the 12% value-added tax and no longer considered export sales, subject to 0% VAT rate upon satisfaction of the following conditions. Number 1, the successful establishment and implementation of an enhanced VAT refund system that grants refunds of creditable input tax within 90 days, sabi niya. Within 90 days from the filing of the VAT refund application with the Bureau, provided that to determine the effectivity of item number 1, all applications filed from January 1, 2018 shall be processed and must be decided within 90 days from the filing of the VAT refund application. And number 2, all pending VAT refund claims, sabi, yan, as of December 31, 2017 shall be fully paid in cash by December 31, 2019. Wow! Nabayaran na kaya ng BIR itong mga merong VAT refund, no? Nabayaran na kaya in cash? Okay. Pasensya na kayong magulong-magulo ang aking... Okay, provided further, ito to. Provided that the Department of Finance shall establish a VAT refund center in the Bureau of Internal Revenue and in the Bureau of Customs that will handle the processing and granting of cash refunds of creditable input tax. An amount equivalent to 5% of the total VAT collection of the PIR and the Bureau of Customs from the immediately preceding year shall be automatically appropriated annually and shall be treated as a special account in the general fund or as trust receipts for the purpose of funding claims for VAT refund, provided that any unused fund at the end of the year shall revert to the general fund. Provided further that the BIR and BOC shall be required to submit to the Congressional Oversight Committee on the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program a quarterly report of all pending claims for refund and any unused fund. Okay, letter B. Okay, may dinilit siya tapos diretso na tayo sa letter B. Wait lang. Ayun, sa mga export sales, sinasabi niya, zero rated yan, no? Yung mga export sales. Ano pa, letter B. Sales to persons or entities whose exemption under special laws or international agreements to which the Philippines is a signatory effectively subjects such sales to zero rate. Yung mga pagbebenta raw sa mga persons or entities na under exemption sila. Kunwari, ito yung mga sale sa mga, kung di ako nagkakamali, ito yung mga sa UN, United Nations delegates, mga ganyan. Kaya, ano, palagay nyo? Okay, transactions deemed sale. Ito yung mga transaction na ipagpapalagay ng batas o under this title o under VAT na sila ay sale. Number 1, transfer, use, or consumption not in the course of business of goods or properties originally intended for sale or for use in the course of business. Okay. Number 2, distribution or transfer to. Letter A, shareholders or investors as share in the profits of the VAT registered persons. Or letter B, creditors in payment of debt. Number 3, consignment of goods if actual sale is not made within 60 days following the date such goods were consigned. And number 4, retirement from or cessation of business with respect to inventories of taxable goods existing of such retirement cessation. Okay, letter C, changes in or cessation of status of a VAT registered person. The tax imposed in subsection A of this section shall also apply to goods disposed of or existing as of a certain date if under circumstances to be prescribed in rules and regulations to be promulgated by the Secretary of Finance upon recommendation of the Commissioner. The status of a person as a VAT registered person changes or is terminated. Letter D, sales, returns, allowances, and sales discounts. The value of goods or property sold and subsequently returned or for which allowances were granted by a VAT registered person may be deducted from the gross sales or receipts for the quarter in which a refund is made or a credit memorandum or refund is issued. Sales discount granted and indicated in the invoice at the time of sale and the grant of which does not depend upon the happening of a future event may be excluded from the gross sales within the same quarter it was given. Letter E, authority of the commissioner to determine the appropriate tax base. So, syempre, si Kume na naman ang may authority dyan. The BIR commissioner, yung tinutukoy dito ha, shall, by rules and regulations prescribed by the Secretary of Finance, determine the appropriate tax base in cases where a transaction is deemed a sale, barter, or exchange of goods or properties under subsection B hereof, or where the gross selling price is unreasonably lower than the actual market value. So, pwedeng i-determine yan ni Commissioner, no? Haba nun ah. So, Section 106, ang haba, no? So, pupunta naman na tayo sa Section 107. May mga dinilit din ang train law dito, pero magbe-break muna tayo. Magkakasunod to eh, yung 106, 107. 107 na ang babasahin natin pagbalik. Sa aking pagbabalik. Ayos to ah. Ayan mo na. Okay. Okay, so section 107 na tayo, no, ng National Internal Revenue Code at ng train law, no? Yung mga pagbabagong binago ng dala ng train law sa National Internal Revenue Code. VAT pa rin ang pinag-uusapan natin, section 107, value added tax on importation of goods. Letter A, sabi niya, in general, there shall be levied, assessed, and collected on every importation of goods a value-added tax equivalent to 12%. Yun na yung nilagay ng train law ngayon. 12%, dati 10. Ngayon, 12% na. Based on the total value used by the Bureau of Customs in determining tariff and customs duties plus customs duties, excise taxes, kung meron man, and other charges such tax to be paid by the importer prior to the release of such goods for customers for customs custody. Wait lang. Yon. Provided that where the customs duties are determined on the basis of the quantity or volume of the goods, the value-added tax shall be based on the landed cost plus excise taxes if any. Meron din mga dinilit na provision dito sa section 107 ng train law. Tapos basahin na natin letter B ng section 107, transfer of goods by tax-exempt persons. In the case of tax-free importation of goods into the Philippines by persons, entities, or agencies exempt from tax, where such goods are subsequently sold, transferred, or exchanged in the Philippines to non-exempt persons or entities, the purchasers, transferees, or recipients shall be considered the importers thereof, who shall be liable for any internal revenue tax on such importation. The tax due on such importation shall constitute a lien or claim on the goods superior to all charges or liens on the goods, irrespective of the possessor thereof. Okay. Magtungo naman tayo sa section 108, value-added tax on sale of services and use or lease of properties. Okay, ang sabi niya rito, letter A, rate and base of tax. There shall be levied, assessed, and collected, sabi niya, a value-added tax equivalent to 12%. Uy, 12% pa rin, no? Kagaya dun sa section 107. 12% of gross receipts derived from the sale or exchange of services, including the use or lease of properties. Okay? Okay, may mga binura siyang provision. Tapos the phrase, sale or exchange of services means performance of all kinds of services in the Philippines. For others for a fee, remuneration, or consideration, including those performed or rendered by construction and service contractors. So yun ang ibig sabihin niya, sale or exchange of services means performance of all kinds of services in the Philippines for others for a fee, remuneration, or consideration, including those performed or rendered by construction and service contractors, stock, real estate, commercial, customs and immigration brokers, lessors or distributors of cinematographic films, persons engaged in milling, processing, manufacturing, or repacking goods for others, proprietors, operators, or keepers of hotels, motels, rest houses, pension houses, inns, resorts, proprietors or operators of restaurants, refreshment parlors, cafes, and other eating places, including clubs and caterers, dealers in securities, lending investors, transportation contractors on their transport of goods or cargoes, including persons who transport goods or cargoes for hire, and other domestic common carriers by land relative to their transport of goods or cargoes, common carriers by air and sea relative to their transport of passengers, goods, or cargoes from one place in the Philippines to another place in the Philippines. Sales of electricity by generation companies. Ito yung dinagdag ng train law. Transmission by any entity and distribution companies, including electric cooperatives. Yan. Services of franchise, grantees of electric utilities, telephone and telegraph, radio and television broadcasting, and all other franchise grantees, except those under Section 119 of this code, and non-life insurance companies, except their crop insurances, including surety, fidelity, indemnity, and bonding companies and similar services, regardless of whether or not the performance thereof calls for the exercise or use of the physical or mental faculties. Okay, ang ibig daw sabi, yung phrase, the phrase sale or exchange of services shall likewise include, ito pa yung mga ibang kasali niya, the lease or use of the right or privilege to use any copyright, sabi, patent, design or model plan, secret formula or process, goodwill, trademark, trade brand, or other like property or right. Number 2, the lease of the use of or the right to use of any industrial, commercial, or scientific equipment. Kasali daw yun dun sa phrase na sale or exchange of services. Number 3, supply of scientific, technical, industrial, or commercial knowledge or information. Number 4, the supply of any assistance that is ancillary and subsidiary to and is furnished as means of enabling the application or enjoyment of any such property or right as is mentioned in subparagraph 2, or any such knowledge or information as is mentioned in subparagraph 3. Number 5, the supply of services by a non-resident person or his employee in connection with the use of property or rights belonging to or the installation or operation of any brand, machinery, or other apparatus purchased from such non-resident. Number 6, the supply of technical advice, assistance, or services rendered in connection with technical management or administration of any scientific, industrial, or commercial undertaking, venture, project, or scheme. Number 7, the lease of motion picture films, film tapes, and discs. And number 8, the lease or the use of the right to use radio, television, satellite transmission, and cable television time. Okay, no? So may 12% yan, ha? May kukunin na 12% sa services and use or lease of properties. Yun ang sinasabi niya. Lease of property shall be subject to the tax herein imposed, sabi niya, irrespective of the place where the contract of lease or licensing agreement was executed, if the property leased or used in the Philippines. So, ano da yan? Subject to tax ang pag-release ng properties irrespective of the place where the contract of lease or licensing agreement was executed. Kahit sa ibang bansa pa yan in-execute yung contract of lease ninyo o kaya licensing agreement, kung ang property naman na inuupahan ninyo ay nasa Pilipinas. The term gross receipts means the total amount of money or its equivalent representing the contract price, compensation, service fee, rental, or royalty, including the amount charged for materials supplied with the services and deposits and advance payments actually or constructively received during the taxable quarter for the services performed or to be performed for another person, excluding o hindi kasali yung value added tax. Letter B, transactions subject to 0% rate. Ito. So the following services performed in the Philippines by VAT registered persons. Malinaw yun, ha? Yung VAT registered lang, ha? Ito mga babanggitin natin ay yung services performed dito sa Pilipinas ng VAT registered persons shall be subject to 0%. Ito yung mga nasa number 1, processing, manufacturing, or repacking goods for other person doing business outside the Philippines, which goods are subsequently exported, where the services are paid for in acceptable foreign currency and accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So, mga VAT registered ito na 0%, 0% rate. Number two, services other than those mentioned in the preceding paragraph rendered to a person engaged in business conducted outside the Philippines or to a non-resident person not engaged in business who is outside the Philippines when the services are performed, the consideration for which is paid for in acceptable foreign currency and accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Number three, services rendered to persons or entities whose exemption under special laws or international agreements to which the Philippines is a signatory effectively subjects the supply of such services to 0% VAT rate. O, nakalagay daw sa mga special laws na 0% ang VAT rate niya. Number 4, services rendered to persons engaged in international shipping or international air transport operations, including leases of property for use thereof. Okay? Kahit daw yung pag-lease ng property ay ginagamit para sa international shipping or international air transport operations. Zero rated ito provided that these services shall be exclusive for international shipping or air transport operations. Number 5, services performed by subcontractors and or contractors in processing, converting, or manufacturing goods for an enterprise whose export sales exceed 70% of total annual production. Number 6, transport of passengers and cargo by air or sea vessels from the Philippines to a foreign country. And number 7, sale of power or fuel generated through renewable sources of energy, such as but not limited to biomass, solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal, ocean energy, and other emerging energy sources using technologies such as fuel cells and hydrogen fuels. Okay, provided, ito, dinagdag niya, that subparagraphs B1 and B5 hereof shall be subject to the 12% VAT and no longer subject to 0% VAT rate upon satisfaction of the following conditions. So, yung subparagraphs B1, saan ba yun? Ayun, subparagraphs B1, yung processing and manufacturing. At saka yung B5, yung services performed by subcontractors. Provided na yung nag-exceed ng 70% yung kanilang total annual production. Magiging subject na raw sila sa 12% VAT kapag ka, number 1, the successful establishment and implementation of an enhanced VAT refund system that grants refunds of creditable input tax within 90 days from the filing of the VAT refund application with the Bureau, provided that to determine the effectivity of item number 1, all applications filed from January 1, 2018 shall be processed and must be decided within 90 days from the filing of the VAT refund application. And number 2, all pending VAT refund claims as of December 31, 2017 shall be fully paid in cash by December 31, 2019. Provided that the Department of Finance shall establish a VAT refund center in the Bureau of Internal Revenue. So, dun pala ang VAT refund center sa BIR and in the Bureau of Customs daw. That will handle the processing and granting of cash refunds of creditable input tax. Okay, sila yung magpoproseso ng mga input tax na pwedeng i-credit sa'yo. Ibig sabihin, ibawas dun sa mga sinisingil nilang buwis sa'yo. An amount equivalent to 5% of the total value-added tax collection of the BIR and the Bureau of Customs from the immediately preceding year sa nagdaang taon shall be automatically appropriated annually and shall be treated as a special account in the general fund or as trust receipts for the purpose of funding claims for VAT refund, provided that any unused fund at the end of the year shall revert to the general fund. Provided further that the BIR and the BOC shall be required to submit to the COCCTRP a quarterly report of all pending claims for refund and any unused fund. Okay. Ang ganda rin ng dinulot ng train law, no? Okay, 108 na yon. 108. How about 109? Tignan natin, ha. Mahaba rin ba? Okay. Tungo na tayo sa section 109. Sandali, silipin natin kung gaano kahaba. Mahaba din. Okay. Basahin na rin natin. Okay. This exempt transactions. Uy, ito yung mga value exempt transactions sa VAT, no? Okay, subject to the provisions of subsection 2 hereof, the following transactions shall be exempt from the value added tax. Letter A, sale or importation of agricultural and marine food products in their original state. Sabi, original state, ha? Livestock and poultry of or livestock and poultry generally used as or yielding or producing foods for human consumption and breeding stock and genetic materials therefore. Products classified under this paragraph shall be considered in their original state even if they have undergone the simple process of preparation or preservation for the market, such as freezing, drying, salting, broiling, roasting, smoking, or stripping. Polished and or husked rice, corn grits, raw cane sugar, and molasses, ordinary salt, and copra shall be considered in their original state. So, exempted yan sa VAT. Okay, letter B, sale or importation of fertilizer, seedlings, seeds, and fingerlings, fish, prawn, livestock, and poultry feeds, including ingredients, whether locally produced or imported, used in the manufacture of finished feeds. Yan. So, kahit imported ito, zero VAT daw siya. No. Kahit imported siya, may tuturing siyang zero VAT. Ito rin, importation of personal and household effects. Okay. Belonging, letter C, importation of personal and household effects belonging to the residents of the Philippines returning from abroad and non-resident citizens coming to resettle in the Philippines, provided that such goods are exempt from custom duties under the Tariff and Customs Code of the Philippines. So, yung mga importation ng mga balikbayan, basta yung goods na dala-dala nila ay exempt from customs duties under the Tariff and Customs Code. Ano yan? Anong tawag dito? Exempt sila sa VAT, sabi, no? Letter D, dito merong ginawang pagbabago ang train law. Importation of professional instruments and implements, tools of trade, occupation or employment. Mahalagang pagbabago yan, sinama yun eh. Tools of trade, occupation, or employment. Zero VAT na yan kahit mag-import ka yan. Wearing apparel, domestic animals, and personal household effects belonging to persons coming to settle in the Philippines, or Filipinos or their families and descendants who are now residents or citizens of other countries. Such parties hereinafter referred to as overseas Filipinos in quantities and of the class suitable to the profession, rank, or position of the persons importing said items. Yan, yung mga for their own use and not for barter or sale, accompanying such persons or arriving within a reasonable time, provided that the Bureau of Customs may, upon the production of satisfactory evidence that such persons are actually coming to settle in the Philippines and that the goods are brought from their former place of abode, exempt such goods, i-exempt daw yung mga goods na yon from payment of duties and taxes, provided further that vehicles, vessels, aircrafts, machineries, and other similar goods for use in manufacture shall not fall within the classification and shall therefore be subject to duties, taxes, and other charges. So, hindi kasali yung vehicles, vessels, aircrafts, machineries, no? Letter E, ano pa ba yung mga exempt daw, no? Services subject to percentage tax under Title 5. So, pagka percentage tax, pagka under ng percentage tax yung iyong whatever, that is exempt from VAT, no? Letter F, services by agricultural contract growers milling for others of palay into rice, corn into grits, and sugarcane into raw sugar. Letter G, medical, dental, hospital, and veterinary services, except those rendered by professionals. Letter H, educational services rendered by private educational institutions duly accredited by the Department of Education, the Commission on Higher Education, the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, and those rendered by government educational institutions. Letter I, sorry. Services rendered by individuals pursuant to an employer-employee relationship. Exempt daw yan sa VAT, okay? Letter J, services rendered by regional or area headquarters established in the Philippines by multinational corporations which act as supervisory, communications, and coordinating centers for their affiliates, subsidiaries, or branches in the Asia-Pacific region and do not earn or derive income from the Philippines. Letter K, transactions which are exempt under international agreements to which the Philippines is a signatory or under special laws, except those under Presidential Decree Number 529. Letter L, sales by agricultural cooperatives duly registered with the Cooperative Development Authority to their members, as well as sale of their produce, whether in its original state or processed form, to non-members, their importation of direct farm inputs, machineries, and equipment, including spare parts thereof, to be used directly and exclusively in the production and or processing of their produce. Letter M. Letter M, wait lang. Nangangalay na ako. Letter M, gross receipts from lending activities by credit or multipurpose cooperatives duly registered with the Cooperative Development Authority. Letter N, sales by non-agricultural, non-electric, and non-credit cooperatives duly registered with the Cooperative Development Authority, provided that the share capital contribution of each member does not exceed 15,000 pesos and regardless of the aggregate capital and net surplus ratably distributed among the members. Letter O, export sales by persons who are not VAT registered. And syempre, not VAT registered sila tapos export. So, malamang ano yan, exempt yan sa VAT. VAT ang pinag-usapan natin dito ay mga exempt sa VAT. Letter P, ito may pagbabagong ginawa. Sale of real properties not primarily held for sale to customers or held for lease in the ordinary course of trade or business, or real property utilized for low cost and socialized housing as defined by RA 7279, otherwise known as the Urban Development and Housing Act of 1992 and other related laws. So yung mga residential lot valued at 1.5 million pesos and below. Yan, house and yon. So wait lang. Residential lot yon. Residential na lote valued at 1.5 million pesos and below. House and lot and other residential dwellings valued at 2,500,000 pesos and below. Yung mga ganyan, sale niya mga yan ay VAT exempted. Provided that beginning January 31, 2021, uy, malapit na yun. Ano na tayo, magtatapos na ang November. 2020 tayo ngayon. So, that beginning January 31, 2021, the VAT exemption shall only apply to sale of real properties not primarily held for sale to customers or held for lease in the ordinary course of trade or business, sale of real property utilized for socialized housing as defined by RA 7279, sale of house and lot and other residential dwellings with a selling price of not more than 2 million pesos. Provided further that every 3 years thereafter, sabi niya, every 3 years thereafter, wait lang, the amount herein stated shall be adjusted to its present values using the Consumer Price Index as published by the Philippine Statistics Authority o yung PSA. Kung saan tayo nangunguha ng mga ang tawag dito, birth certificate. Letter Q, may binago ang train law. Lease of a residential unit with a monthly rental not exceeding 15,000 pesos. Yun. Letter R, sale, importation, printing, or publication of books and any newspaper, magazine, review, or bulletin, which appears at regular intervals with fixed prices for subscription and sale, and which is not devoted principally to the publication of paid advertisements. Letter S, transport of passengers by international carriers. Letter T, sale, importation, or lease of passenger or cargo vessels and aircraft, including engine, equipment, and spare parts thereof for domestic or international transport operations. Letter U, ito may pagbabago ang train. Importation of fuel, goods, and supplies by persons engaged in international shipping or air transport operations, provided that the fuel, goods, and supplies shall be used for international shipping or air transport operations. Letter V, services of bank, non-bank financial intermediaries performing quasi-banking functions and other non-bank financial intermediaries. W, ito, mga dinagdag ng train ito. Sale or lease of goods and services to senior citizens and persons with disability as provided under RA 9994 o yung Expanded Senior Citizens Act at saka yung 10574, yung Act Expanding the Benefits and Privileges of Persons with Disability. Letter X, transfer of property pursuant to Section 40C2 of the NIRC as amended. Letter Y, association dues, membership fees, and other assessments and charges collected by homeowners, associations, and condominium corporations. Letter Z, sale of gold to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So, dito na siya nilagay sa non-VAT, yung sale of gold. Dito na siya sa provision na to. AA, ayan, marami pang dinagdag yung AA, sale of drugs and medicines prescribed for diabetes, high cholesterol, and hypertension beginning January 1, 2019. So, wala ng VAT yan. BB, sale or lease of goods or properties or the performance of services other than the transactions mentioned in the preceding paragraphs. The gross annual sales and or receipts do not exceed the amount of 3 million pesos. Okay? Yung mga sale or lease of goods daw, yung mga transaction belonging doon sa mga nagdaan nating binanggit, basta hindi sila lalagpas sa 3 million pesos. At yung ikalawa, balikan natin, wait lang. So, yung mga services na yun, no? Ito yung nabanggit natin mga yun, yun yung employer-employee relationship daw yun yung sinasabi na subject to the exempt from the VAT, no? Yung mga nabanggit natin pagkarami-raming yun, exempt from VAT siya. Tsaka yung VAT registered person daw may elect that subsection 1 not apply to its sale of goods or properties or services provided that an election made under this subsection shall be irrevocable for a period of 3 years from the quarter the election was made. So yung VAT registered person daw pwede siyang pumili na yung subsection 1 ay hindi mag-a-apply sa kanya, no? Ito yung subsection 1 kung saan naka-under yung mga A to AA na binasa natin, no? So pwede niyang piliin 'yon provided na yung pagpili niya na 'yon hindi niya na pwedeng palitan sa loob ng 3 years from the quarter the election was made. Okay? Wait lang. Wala ako. Pinicture niya nung nag-ano. Kung kailan nagpatay, kanya pinicturean. Okay, tayo nagbabalik para basahin pa rin. Ito may kinalaman pa rin sa mga VAT, ano? Kanina puro VAT yung mga binabasa natin. Pero ngayon ang babasahin na natin is about VAT pa rin. Pero yung tax credits na. Section 110, tax credits in relation to VAT, no? So, Section 110, letter A, creditable input tax. So, number 1, any input tax evidenced by a VAT invoice or official receipt issued in accordance with Section 113 hereof on the following transactions shall be creditable against the output tax. Ibig sabihin ng input tax dito, yung mga ginamit mo kadalasan para, ito, letter A, purchase or importation of goods for sale, for conversion into or intended to form part of a finished product for sale, including packaging materials, for use as supplies in the course of business, for use as materials supplied in the sale or of service, or for use in trade or business for which deduction for depreciation or amortization is allowed under this code. And letter B, purchase of services on which a value-added tax has been actually paid. O ibig sabihin, bayad na. No? So, yun yung mga pwedeng creditable against the output tax mo. Pwedeng ibawas sa madaling salita. O number 2, ano pa ba yung mga sinasabi? The input tax on domestic purchase or importation of goods, properties by a VAT-registered person shall be creditable. Letter A, to the purchaser upon consummation of sale and on importation of goods or properties, sabi niya. And letter B, to the importer upon payment of the value-added tax prior to the release of the goods from the custody of the Bureau of Customs, sabi niya. Provided that the input tax on goods purchased or imported in a calendar month for use in trade or business for which deduction for depreciation is allowed under this code shall be spread evenly over the month of acquisition and the 59 succeeding months if the aggregate acquisition cost for such goods, excluding the VAT component thereof, exceeds o lumagpas sa 1 million pesos. Provided, however, that if the estimated useful life of the capital goods is less than 5 years as used for depreciation purposes, then the input tax shall be spread over such a shorter period. Ito yung dinagdag pa ng train law. Provided further that the amortization of the input VAT shall be allowed only until December 31, 2021, after which the taxpayers with unutilized input VAT on capital goods purchased or imported shall be allowed to apply the same as scheduled until fully utilized. Provided finally that in the case of purchase of services, lease or use of properties, the input tax shall be creditable to the purchaser, lessee, or licensee upon payment of the compensation, rental, royalty, or fee. Ayan. O ikatatlo, sabi niya, ano ba yung mga tax credits na pwede, ano? A VAT-registered person who is also engaged in transactions not subject to the value-added tax shall be allowed tax credit as follows. Letter A, total input tax which can be directly attributed to transactions subject to value-added tax. And letter B, a rateable portion of any input tax which cannot be directly attributed to either activity. Okay. Yun yung sinasabi niya dito sa Section 110. Ibig daw sabihin ng input tax yung the value-added tax due from or paid by a VAT-registered person in the course of his trade or business on importation of goods or local purchase of goods or services, including lease or use of property from a VAT-registered person. Okay. So, yung isang VAT-registered person, nagbabayad siya ng buwis in the course of his trade, business, importation, lease sa isang VAT-registered person. Lease ng property, ganyan, from a VAT-registered person. It shall also include the transitional input tax determined in accordance with Section 111 of this code. Ibig sabihin naman daw ng output tax means the value-added tax due on the sale or lease of taxable goods or properties or services by any person registered or required to register under Section 236 of this code. Ibig sabihin nun, yung tax due, yung babayaran mo sa sale or lease of taxable goods. So, ibig lang sabihin yan, kung malaki ang iyong input tax at maliit ang iyong output tax, panalo ka. Kasi malaki yung maibabawas mo, yung input tax pwede mo ibawas sa output tax, di ba? Creditable daw siya, pero kung malaki ang output tax mo, marami kang buwis na babayaran sa sale, pero maliit ang input tax mo, medyo pangit yata ang negosyo. Parang ganun, ano? Okay, letter B. Sandali lang. Excess output or input tax. If at the end of any taxable quarter, the output tax exceeds the input tax, the excess shall be paid by the VAT registered person. If the input tax exceeds the output tax, the excess shall be carried over to the succeeding quarter or quarters, provided, however, that any input tax attributable to zero-rated sales by a VAT-registered person may, at his option, be refunded or credited against other internal revenue taxes subject to the provisions of Section 112. Letter C. Determination of creditable input tax. Okay. The sum of the excess input tax carried over from the preceding month or quarter and the input tax creditable to a VAT-registered person during the taxable month or quarter shall be reduced by the amount of claim for refund or tax credit for value-added tax and other adjustments such as purchase returns or allowances and input tax attributable to exempt sale. The claim for tax credit referred to in the foregoing paragraph shall include not only those filed with the BIR but also those filed with other government agencies such as the Board of Investments and the Bureau of Customs. Okay. So sabi lang dito sa letter B, kapag sa dulo ng taxable quarter, mas malaki yung yung mas malaki ang output tax kaysa sa input tax. Yung excess nun, babayaran syempre ng VAT registered person, di ba? Carried over yun to the succeeding quarters or years. Dami mong bayarin, no? Pero any input tax attributable to zero sales by a VAT registered person may be refunded or tax credited. Okay. O yung mga sobra naman daw na input tax na kinary over mo, magiging deductible naman sa'yo. O magiging claim naman sa'yo. So, dapat mas malaki yung input mo over output, no? Para malaki yung pwede mong i-deduct. Okay? So, yan yung section 110. Wait lang. Okay, so basahin na natin itong section 111, no? Yung transitional or presumptive input tax credits. So letter A, transitional input tax credits. A person who becomes liable to value-added tax or any person who elects to be a VAT registered person shall, subject to the filing of an inventory according to rules and regulations prescribed by the Secretary of Finance, upon recommendation of the Commissioner, be allowed input tax on his beginning inventory of goods, materials, and supplies equivalent for 8% of the value of such inventory or the actual value-added tax paid on such goods, materials, and supplies, whichever is higher, which shall be creditable against the output tax. So, pwede mong ibawas daw, no? So, transitional input tax credits daw. So, kung ikaw ay liable sa value-added tax, di ba? Pinili mong maging VAT registered, no? So, pwede ka raw payagan ng ang tawag dito ng Secretary of Finance, no? Ng 8% ng inventory mo ng iyong mga goods, materials, and supplies na maging creditable against the output tax. So, kabawasan ito sa iyong output tax. Letter B, presumptive input tax credits. So, number 1, persons or firms engaged in the processing of sardines, mackerel, and milk, and in manufacturing refined sugar and cooking oil shall be allowed the presumptive input tax creditable against the output tax equivalent to 1.5% of the gross value in money of the purchases of primary agricultural products which are used as inputs to their production. So 1.5% ng gross value ng kanilang mga binili na agricultural products ay pwede nilang deductible yan sa kanilang output tax. As used in this subsection, the term processing shall mean pasteurization, canning, and activities which through physical or chemical process alter the exterior texture or form of inner substance of a product in such manner as to prepare it for use to which it could not have been put in its original form or condition. Okay, so ituloy lang natin, no? Yung saan na ba ako? Ayan. Okay. Yung presumptive input tax pa rin, no? Number 2 naman, public works. Number 2 ng presumptive input tax credits pa rin, no? Number 2, public works contractors, sabi niya. Public works contractors shall be allowed a presumptive input tax equivalent to 1.5% of the contract price with respect to government contracts only in lieu of actual input taxes therefrom. So 1.5 din sila, pero only in lieu of actual input taxes therefrom. O magpunta naman tayo sa section 112. Dali lang, may mga pagbabago kasi sa section 112 eh. Okay. Pero dito muna natin tatapusin yung title natin dito sa 112 na ito. Okay. Okay. Refunds or tax credits of input tax. So sabi niya, letter A, zero-rated or effectively zero-rated sales. So sabi niya, any VAT-registered person whose sales are zero-rated or effectively zero-rated may, within 2 years after the close of the taxable quarter when the sales were made, apply for the issuance of a tax credit. So, pwede siya mag-apply within 2 years after the close of the taxable quarter ng uh, mag-apply siya ng issuance of a tax credit certificate or refund of creditable input tax due or paid attributable to such sales, except transitional input tax to the extent that such in, input tax has not been applied against output tax, So, kasi zero rated or effectively zero rated sales siya So, pwede siyang mag-apply pa rin, ng kabawasan sa kanyang output tax. Ibig sabihin kasi nitong input tax na to, yung dati mo nang naibayad o naipasa sa'yo, alam mo, ayun, tapos binayaran mo yun in the course of your business, i-deduct mo dun sa yung output tax, yung mismong tax na babayaran mo. Provided, however, that in the case of zero-rated sales under Section 106A2A1, number 2 and B, and Section 108B1 and 2, the acceptable foreign currency exchange proceeds thereof had been duly accounted for in accordance with the rules and regulations of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Provided further that where the taxpayer is engaged in zero-rated or effectively zero-rated sale and also in taxable or exempt sale of goods or properties or services, and the amount of creditable input tax due or paid cannot be directly and entirely attributed to any one of the transactions, it shall be allocated proportionately on the basis of the volume of sales. Provided finally that for a person making sales that are zero rated under Section 108B number 6, the input taxes shall be allocated ratably between his zero rated and non-zero rated sales. Letter B, cancellation of VAT registration. So, a person whose registration has been canceled due to retirement or cessation of business or due to changes in the cessation or cessation of status under Section 106C of this code may, within 2 years from the date of cancellation, apply for the issuance of a tax credit certificate for any unused input tax which may be used in payment of his other internal revenue taxes. Kasi di ba anong tawag rito, merong threshold Parang nalimutan ko na kung gaano karami yung sales na kailangan mong sa isang taon para i-compel ka ng batas na magpa-VAT registered, no? Basta may ganun yan Okay. Letter C, period within which refund or tax credit of input taxes shall be made. Ito, may mga ginawa si Train Law dito. In proper cases, the Commissioner shall grant a refund for creditable input taxes within 90 days from the date of submission of the official receipts or invoices and other documents in support of the application filed in accordance with subsection A and B hereof, provided that should the Commissioner find that the grant of refund is not proper, the Commissioner must state in writing the legal and factual basis for the denial. In case of full or partial denial of the claim for the tax refund, the taxpayer affected may, within 30 days from the receipt of the decision denying the claim, appeal. Pwede silang mag-appeal ng desisyon na to sa Court of Tax Appeals, provided, however, that failure on the part of any official, agent, or employee of the BIR to act on the application within 90-day period shall be punishable under Section 269 of this code. So, yung Commissioner shall grant a refund for creditable input taxes sa loob ng 90 days. Okay. Kapag ikaw ay karapat-dapat naman. Pero upon denial daw or full or partial denial, pwede kang umapila within 30 days sa Court of Appeals. Mas pinabilis sa ngayong train law yung action ng Commissioner Hindi gaya ng dati, mas mabagal. Letter D, manner of giving refund. So, refunds shall be made upon warrants drawn by the Commissioner or by his duly authorized representative without the necessity of being countersigned by the Chairman, Commission on Audit, the provisions of the Administrative Code of 1987 to the contrary notwithstanding, provided that refunds under this paragraph shall be subject to post-audit by the Commission on Audit. So, doon nagtatapos yung title natin, sa susunod nating pagbabasa, pupunta naman tayo sa chapter 2 nitong title. Hindi pa pala tapos yung title, kundi doon nagtatapos yung chapter about VAT. Pupunta naman tayo dito sa chapter 2. Okay? Saan ba ako? Okay. Punta naman tayo sa chapter 2. Mga VAT pa rin, ano? O bakit hindi kaya natin tapusin? Teka nga, tignan ko nga. Kaya bang tapusin na to? Mahaba-haba pa eh. Mahaba-haba pa siya. Okay. 112. O sige, basahin na lang natin tong chapter 2 compliance requirements. So, tapusin natin between section 113 hanggang dali lang. 113 hanggang 115. Okay. So, compliance requirements. Invoicing and invoicing and accounting requirements for VAT registered persons. Okay. Hello. Babatiin muna natin si Op Gamers GG. Hello. I'm just reading our Philippine laws. Hello. So, Chapter 2, Compliance Requirements, Section 113, Invoicing and Accounting Requirements for VAT Registered Persons. Letter A. So, invoicing requirements. A VAT registered person shall, for every sale, issue an invoice or receipt. In addition to the information required under Section 237, the following information shall be indicated in the invoice receipt. Number 1, a statement that the seller is a VAT registered person, followed by his taxpayer's identification number. And number 2, the total amount which the purchaser pays or is obligated to pay to the seller with the indication that such amount includes the value-added tax. Okay. Letter B, accounting requirements. So, yun yung mga invoicing requirements, no? Bawat pagbebenta raw ng isang VAT registered person, mag-i-issue siya ng invoice or receipt. Nakalagay sa resibo na yon yung malinaw doon sa resibo yan na nakalagay na ikaw ay isang VAT registered person, nakalagay yung tax identification number mo, and yung total amount na binabayaran ng namimili sa iyo plus yung value added tax na ipinapataw mo sa kanya. So, yung sa mga VAT registered lang ito, pag hindi ka VAT registered, hindi ka pwede magpasa ng VAT sa customer mo. Letter B, accounting requirements. Notwithstanding the provisions of Section 233, all persons subject to the value-added tax under Sections 106 and 108 shall, in addition to the regular accounting records required, maintain a subsidiary sales journal and subsidiary purchase journal on which the daily sales and purchases are recorded. The subsidiary journal shall contain such information as may be required by the Secretary of Finance. Section 114, ito. Merong pagbabagong ginawa rito ang train law. Sige. Section 114, return and payment of value-added tax. So, letter A, in general, every person liable to pay the value-added tax imposed under this title shall file a quarterly return of the amount of his gross sales or receipts within 25 days following the close of each taxable quarter prescribed for each taxpayer. Provided, however, that VAT-registered persons shall pay the value-added tax on a monthly basis. Provided, finally, that beginning January 1, 2023, the filing and payment required under this subsection shall be done within 25 days following the close of each taxable year. So, magpa-file ka and magpa-pay ka pagka beginning January 2023 sa loob ng 25 days following the close of each taxable quarter. Any person whose registration has been cancelled in accordance with Section 236 shall file a return and pay a tax due thereon within 25 days from the date of cancellation of registration, provided that only one consolidated return shall be filed by the taxpayer for his principal place of business or head office and all branches. Letter B, where to file the return and pay the tax? Saan ka ba magpa-file nitong return na sinasabi na ito ng VAT na yan? Except as the Commissioner otherwise permits, the return shall be filed with the tax paid to an authorized agent bank. Pwede nating hanapin, i-google, sino ba yung mga authorized agent bank ng BIR? Revenue Collection Officer or duly authorized city or municipal treasurer in the Philippines located within the revenue district where the taxpayer is registered or required to register. Letter C, withholding of value-added tax. The government or any of its political subdivisions, instrumentalities, or agencies, including government-owned or controlled corporations, shall, before making payment on account of each purchase of goods and services which are subject to the value-added tax imposed in sections 106 and 108 of this code, deduct and withhold the value-added tax imposed in sections 106 and 108 of this code, deduct and withhold the final value-added tax at the rate of 5% of the gross payment thereof, provided that beginning January 1, 2021, the VAT withholding system under this subsection shall shift from final to a creditable system. That provided further that the payment for lease or use of properties or property rights to non-resident owners shall be subject to 12% withholding tax at the time of the payment. Provided finally that payments for purchases of goods and services arising from projects funded by official development assistance as defined under RA 8182, otherwise known as the Official Development Assistance Act of 1996, as amended, shall not be subject to final withholding tax system as imposed in this subsection. So pag yung mga proyekto under the Official Development Fund, hindi sila subject sa final withholding tax. For purposes of this section, the payer or person in control of the payment shall be considered as the withholding agent. The value-added tax withheld under this section shall be remitted within 10 days following the end of the month. Following the end of the month, the withholding was made. Ulitin natin, the value-added tax withheld under this section shall be remitted within 10 days following the end of the month, the withholding was made. So, ilalagay nila siguro yan sa general fund. No? Okay, so doon tayo hindi pa pala. 114 ba ito? Dali tama 114. And finally, 115 para matapos natin itong title na ito. Okay? Power of the Commissioner, Section 115, Power of the Commissioner to suspend the business operations of a taxpayer. Ang kapangyarihan ng Commissioner ng BIR, no? Talagang, kaya sinasabi nila, the tax has the power to destroy, no? Biruin mo sa Commissioner, may kapangyarihan magpasuspend ng negosyo, no? The Commissioner or his authorized representative is hereby empowered to suspend the business operations and temporarily close the business establishment of any person for any of the following violations. Letter A, sa mga VAT-registered persons. Number 1, failure to issue receipts or invoices. Di ka nag-issue ng resibo at invoice. Number 2, resibo or invoice. Number 2, failure to file a value-added tax return as required under Section 114. Or number 3, understatement of taxable sales or receipts by 30% or more of his correct taxable sales or receipts for the taxable quarter. Nandadaya ka, nag-understatement ka. Letter B, failure of any person to register as required under Section 236. The temporary closure of the establishment shall be for the duration of not less than 5 days, di bababa sa 5 araw, and shall be lifted only upon compliance with whatever requirements prescribed by the Commissioner in the closure order. So, yung 236 na ito, pupuntahan din natin yan, pero ito yata yung nagsasabi ng amount na kung magkano, malaking-malaki na yung amount mo ng sales mo sa nagdaang taon, automatic, kailangan ka ng mag-VAT registered. Kailangan ka magparehistro as VAT registered. Okay, so doon nagtatapos itong buong title na ito. Next na pagbabasa natin, pupunta na tayo sa title, anong tawag dito? Title 5 o yung tinatawag na other percentage taxes na magsisimula sa Section 116. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So God bless sa yung lahat, at sana samahan niyo ako ulit magbasa-basa At subukan natin itong ipaliwanag in layman's term.